Paul, welcome to Living Off Rentals.
Hi, Kirby. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you taking the time today and sharing your journey with the community. Just to provide a little bit of background for people who don't know Paul. Paul's a member of the First Vacation Rental Investment Blueprint, which is a program where I help people find and buy their first high cash flowing short term rental. And he's someone I really admire because he's been really successful in the military and in the corporate world. But he wanted something more, and he realized that it was going to take a long time to save his way to, the life that he wanted. So instead of just kind of thinking about it and talking about it, he took action and is well on his way to creating a lot more financial freedom and capacity in his life through a handful of deals that he's already done and in the past year or so, which is something we're going to talk about a lot today. And for people who are tuning in, I think he's going to have some really good lessons learned if you want to do something similar in your own life, and incorporate some of the lessons. So first off, can you share a bit about what you did prior to getting into real estate and how real estate investing kind of turned into a reality for you?
I guess I was started, was a West Point graduate, commissioned in the Army. I got stationed up in Fairbanks, Alaska, of all places. I spent about 8 years active duty and got into the civilian world after coming off active duty there. And sorry, I think you froze for a second. Coming after active duty, I've done like reliability engineering, aviation stuff. But when I was up in Fort Wayne, right, I took advantage of the VA loan. We couldn't find any housing on post. They wouldn't let us live on post because my wife was pregnant at the time, and there was just like a safety consideration. It was kind of weird. There was no rentals. So we found a place and we bought it. And we got kind of attached to it, and we're like, oh, we don't want to sell it. Let's rent it. And not even thinking what that was. And it was kind of a nightmare. The mortgage, the rent barely covered the mortgage. It was just a lot of maintenance issues. I cursed the place every day for 2 years. But then after the third year, the fourth year.
Just to back up a little bit. So you bought it right when you got up, for the most part, you get right when you got up there, lived in it. And then after you got stationed somewhere else, you kept it for 2 years as a rental, trying to manage it from there. That's what you're saying?
Oh, sorry. I kept it for 10 years. I still have it. I kept it for a decade after. I just said I hated it for 2 years. So
and you grew to love it.
Didn't like it at all. And eventually, because the rent kept going up and the mortgage kept staying the same. And then there's such a housing shortage, people would just grab it up really quickly. And I mean, if there's ever a place that's further away, more of a maintenance nightmare, it's Fairbanks, Alaska. But after 5, 6, 7 years, and then I was a guy out of the Army and working on a civilian career, and I was looking back on that, and I'm like, this thing's bringing in upwards each month of $1,000, and it grew a lot of equity. So it had more in equity than I had in my retirement account. I've always been a saver, 6% match companies, really good companies. And I was like, my God, the amount of cash flow now and the tax savings and the appreciation that's now more than me being, and I thought it was a good saver. And I just kind of fell into this place. We liked it. We didn't do any analysis for renting it or buying it or any of that, which probably would have saved us a little bit of heartache. But I was like, man, imagine if you did this with just a little bit of planning and forethought. And that's what kind of got my bug into real estate. And when I got to Florida, which I picked for its just quality of life and being able to get a nicer house and better schools and possibly invest in real estate, I just wanted to do it more and see how I could repeat that.
Got it. Interesting. Yeah. And did you use your VA loan for that first one in Alaska?
I did. I used my VA loan for that one, and because the VA isn't really like an amount that's set. When I did my second home, I did a VA loan on that as well, and then also turned that into a rental. So
nice.
In Florida.
So 0 down on both your first 2 houses then, right?
On 0. And I guess because the VA, it's more complicated than it seems, but whatever it worked out to the entitlement, I had to put like $15,000 down. So essentially as close to 0 as you can get. They explained to me why it wasn't 0. I pretended to understand, but whatever, I was at the limits. So it was close enough to get pretty much the 2 houses.
Right. Yeah. There's some calculation that if it's your second one, then you have to possibly put some down, but still, yeah, 15 grand for two houses that turned into rental houses that you ended up. So the Fairbanks one, you what did you buy it for, and what is it worth now?
I probably yeah bought it for about 280, and I'd like to say 420, but I could probably get 399. I think if you put it right under four, it would sell pretty quickly.
Wow,
And
wow.
then I have a 2.25% interest rate on that, so it is assumable. So it's a selling point, but it's been. I mean, I'm paying more in principal every month than I am in interest, so it's just keeps. It's just that flywheel. It keeps cash flowing, doing very
Yeah.
well, and even the maintenance. You get hit with something breaks. It's normally expensive, but it's well worth it when you look at the long run numbers.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's that saying that probably most people have heard, don't wait to buy real estate, buy real estate and wait. And this is
Yep.
just such a perfect example. You didn't have it all figured out, but you just, had figured out enough to be dangerous and buy a property. And then over
Oh
time,
yeah.
real estate is so forgiving that, if you look back over history, it always appreciates over the long run. And so what a great way to build up a ton of equity and wealth just by sitting on it. So I'm curious, was there a point then? So you bought this first property in Fairbanks, then you went to Florida, you got out of the Army, started working in your corporate role. Was there something that, it sounds like you were interested in real estate, but was there something in your job or in your personal life that made you like kind of say, enough is enough. I'm going to make this a reality, and I'm going to move forward with like learning real estate investing and make it happen?
Yeah, I guess maybe there's always something just gnawing in the back of my head, and knowing and I've got three kids now, and I've worked the civilian job. I still do the Army Reserve thing, and I'm just spread thinner and thinner. A few volunteer jobs, so it just feels like a lot of my day is dictated for me. And then I've worked for really good companies after I've got out of the Army, and I work remote. I can travel on kind of my own terms. I don't have to commute. And I'm like, this is as good as it can get from the working world. And I'm still not overly satisfied with it. And I'm like, and this is the pinnacle, things could go down. And then COVID hit, and I was always, I was in the Army through, 08 to like 17, or sorry, 09 to 17. And then when I got out in 17, like there's, jobs aplenty going on. I've always done the right thing. And then COVID hit, and I was furloughed for 1 week, which is as good as it could get really for that too. But it really hit me. I'm like, I've done all these things right, really, school, work, I've always been a hard worker, saved. And I was like, I'm always one job away from being jobless. So that I think just kind of hit me. Like I need to diversify. And, if you're not working for yourself, you're just working for somebody else. And unfortunately, as good as the company's been, you're expendable in a way. So I think that just kind of made me like, I need to do something else. And then I turned to real estate because I had such a good example. And I found the Service Academy Business Forum. So it was like a group I could trust. And I found White Feather, like a group I could trust. And I found you guys living off rentals. And so it was like all these really good advice groups that I'd say always gave more than they wanted in return. And no one was ever trying to sell me something. So it was like a group I could learn with comfortably. And then just, I spent a lot of time reading it was on like a school course where it's like, here's all the books you should read optional. Like, yeah, I'm never going to do that. But I was like very interested. Like I flew through the books. I wanted to learn more. I talked to a lot of people, tried to provide value where I could, even though I was just starting out. Because I know the Florida market, know a little about HOAs. I run one, so that's always a thankless job. But so I've tried to give others. But it's been a really great network, and I think that like COVID thing just let it sink in that I need to do something. And the fact the Alaska house made me more money than saving has ever done was like, saving's just not enough.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And initially, when you decided after COVID you were gonna do this and get into real estate more heavily, you were thinking long-term rentals, right? Like that's typically where I see most people start. What changed for you to make you want to switch into short-term rentals?
For sure. Yeah, definitely long-term rentals because I was familiar with that. And I'm like, I don't have the time, you don't have the time when maybe I don't have the priority. But so that made sense. And I was looking at a lot of new builds, and it was great because you could put down, even without a VA loan, maybe a $15,000 binder, and you just let the house appreciate, which can be a dangerous game, but things were going well. So that was working. But the interest rates started creeping up and the house prices started creeping up. And then so the cash flow and the margins just started shrinking. And even with that, I thought real estate was very good. But I'm like, you know what? I've set myself up with a really good retirement plan. Like I'm just excellent. Like where I'm at now, if I keep buying it, I'm like, I have a great retirement plan. And that's nothing to sneeze at. Like, so that's a huge thing. That's very important. But I was like, it's not enough. I want some cash flow. I want to enjoy my life now. I've unfortunately known people in the Army who the second they've got out, have passed away in terrible things. That's life. So I'm like, I want to be able to make a living and be able to live off this now. And I think the only way to do that, even in the good interest rates, was short-term rentals. And now in this inflationary period, high interest rates, if you want to replace an income, like short-term rentals, really the only viable option right now, unless you're buying a house outright, which a lot of us can't do. Myself included. I haven't bought any house outright. So.
Yeah. And you don't need to, because there's so many great financing options out there. But that's a great point you bring up. Not only can you create wealth for the future, for your retirement, by just sitting on these properties and just watching the principal get paid down and appreciation do its thing. But with short-term rentals, you can make thousands of dollars per month potentially with a good short-term rental at the same time while it's appreciating. So, such a double advantage, I guess, to that. So, I guess let's get into what properties you decided to buy then. Once you decided you were going to go the short-term rental route, I know we talked the first time, it was right at the end of 2022, going into 2023, that's when you enrolled in the program. You hadn't done a short-term rental yet. So what'd you do from there? Like, how'd you decide what you were going to buy, and what was your strategy?
Yeah, I guess I was first looking for, 3 or 4 bedrooms. I've always seen in real estate, 3 to 4 bed, 2 bath seems to be like that optimum spot. Starts to drop off after that. I like new build. I don't like any maintenance. So whenever I do the numbers, and this doesn't always have to be the way, but I personally, maintenance is just all over the place. But if you buy a new build with a 1, 2, 3-year warranty, you can just factor that out. So I'd rather buy a little pricier, forgo a little bit of cash flow if I just know it's locked in there. And maintenance just takes normally personal time. So I didn't have that. So I knew I wanted that. And I'd seen some people buying up old pieces of property, getting rid of double wides and putting new builds up there. So I was looking around St. Augustine and this town called Palatka, Florida, which was very affordable and I thought could blow up in the long term. So I was looking at that, and I guess I took a half measure beforehand before I got into short-term rentals. I bought an RV too and did that as a short-term rental. A little different than property, but it kind of got me used to how do I talk to guests? How do I do a listing? Because I knew Zillow and I knew all that, but how do I run a short-term platform? So I did that, and that actually spent a great time for RVing, especially in Florida. So that thing is out all the time, actually probably more than I want it. But it was a very good introduction to handling short-term guests. But it led me to get a property in Palatka, probably in like March. I found it, I saw it. I always go with I never bring a buyer's realtor because I feel once you've done a few contracts, and that's what Affinity Realtor. Realtors are very good. Realtors are very valuable, but on the buying side, I find it's best to go with the seller's realtor. And it just seems like you get so much more information on that property, maybe even more than you should. And your offer always seems to make it to the top. So I've done that 4 times now, and I've always got the house with the first offer.
Wow, interesting. So that was the first one of those 4 properties that you purchased, the first short-term rental in Palatka last March?
In Palatka, yeah, that was first of 4. I guess I'm on 3.5 now, so I haven't closed on the 4th one. But yeah, that was the first one in Palatka, and it was a very good rental. I actually did as a short term for a while, and then oddly enough, I converted it to a long term, which I'm looking at converting my long terms, but there was just somebody who made me an offer for a 2-year lease that I couldn't refuse. When I looked at the housing, there's just no long-term housing at all, because a little bit how the government works there and the taxes, I can see why it's not very favorable to homeowners or investors, unfortunately. So it worked out a little bit less than what I was top lining. I was able to do it as a long-term, forgoed some of the tax savings, but I bought that because it was a great house. I wanted to do it. I wanted to move quickly. I don't want to call it a misstep because that house has appreciated greatly, and it will probably be able to finance another short-term rental. But it really let me bracket in and see that, St. Augustine, Florida, and on the outskirts of the downtown area is just such a hotter market. And, had St. Augustine not been close to there, Palatka would have been fine. I would have been great with it, but it's like 40 minutes from me. It's a little bit further, a little bit less touristy, not as much built up. So I was just like, this was good, but St. Augustine can be great. So I kind of shifted my focus to a place that is now 15 minutes from me. And I picked up 2 properties that are within a mile of each other right now.
Nice. Yeah. And that's something you brought up there about, buying a new build property. I've had a lot of questions about that. We're in the process of building 2 new builds right now, 2 duplex side-by-side properties. It'll be short-term rentals in Florida. And, I've done a lot of analysis on this, and there's definitely trade-offs, like the new build, like you said, you don't have maintenance issues. I mean, you shouldn't if you're hiring the right builder. And so, it's everything's brand new. All your systems are brand new. Everything, you're starting from scratch there and not inheriting somebody else's issues potentially. But a lot of times, the cost to build brand new compared to what you could potentially find, in terms of an existing deal of the same size, you're paying a little bit of a premium. So sometimes you take a hit on cash flow, but that property is going to appreciate well because, it's newer, it's nicer, it's got, everything's brand new. So, so there's pros and cons to both. I think it just has to align with your goals. And so you had some takeaways there. What did the next property? So that one, I remember looking at your numbers on that one, and it was like, I think it was like $1,300 of cash flow on that property. And so, and what'd you buy that one for?
What was Lundy? I think it was 285. Yeah, so it's 285 with a
nice
20% down on that one. Yeah, and it's already seen appreciation just because the lack of. It's a new house. It's on a nice corner plot. Actually, it's walking distance to the golf course. So all these things I thought were very good and probably are still very good short-term rental factors, but also a good long-term rental. Factor. And I'm probably cash flowing still $1,000 a month on it as a long-term. So not having to commute out there, not having to do that. So it worked out, really well for that one. It taught me what I wanted to do. I did the furnishings. I've kind of learned more about speed and kind of doing everything. I pretty much do everything new now because anything that I bought kind of secondhand that was nice, it just doesn't last as long. It doesn't fit the house. So I've kind of streamlined our buying process and not spent too much more on doing it. So we did these next 2, and I felt like we really locked down how we furnish it, how we do the beds, all the supplies. So now doing this 3 times in a row, it gets a lot faster. And I've the other 2 that we've done, because we already turned the tax year, we've seen significant tax savings for them too with the short-term tax loophole. And we put you put a lot of money at first into the furnishings and all that, but that's kind of all encapsulated into the loan and the purchase price and everything that you're doing when you're figuring out the finances. So even the first year where you put out a lot of expenses, you take in a lot of income too. And then when you do your taxes, a lot of that can become tax deductible. And we even did a cost segregation study to go down the rabbit hole for you. And that proved to be very, very beneficial. So for those 2 properties that we put a lot of money out. People would say a lot of money, but it's just on paper. We actually were able to get considerable tax savings back. So at the end of the year, it just made it well worth it. And I'd say we made back what we spent on the furniture.
Nice. So just want to clarify a couple things for people listening then. So number one is, your first property works as a long-term rental and short-term rental, which I think is so smart. Being able to purchase a brand new build, really nice property for $280,000 is tough to do anywhere in the U.S. these days, but especially right next to a golf course and, Florida not too far from, the ocean and in a great location. So, but it still works as a great long-term rent. So cash flows really well as well, which I highly recommend if you're buying short-term rentals. And then the second thing you talked about was the tax savings, the short-term rental loophole. You mentioned doing a cost segregation. So basically, at the end of the year, you can break down all the money that you put into this property. They do a study, a cost segregation study, where they break down the components and allow you to write off a big portion of that property. And you can write it off as a short-term rental. You can write it off against your active W-2 income, which you can't do with long-term rentals unless you're a real estate professional, which is very difficult to achieve if you have a W-2 job. So, so that's awesome to hear that you were able to take advantage of that. So what did those next two deals look like in terms of purchase price and cash flow, and what are the numbers on those?
Yep. So the next one was Collier, which we call Collie because now we have a Lundy, a Collie, and a Herbie. So it's just getting kind of ridiculous. But they're all not really named that, but they all have streets, but they've all affectionately been given nicknames. So Collie was $299, and that's what attracted me to it. It was a brand new build. And the double wide went away. They put up this brand new house. It's got hardy board siding, got a steel roof or a metal roof. So it's just no maintenance. And for the area that I'm looking in, you can't find the resales that are 3-bed, 2-bath for that price, or they'll be $285, and it's 20 years old, and you'd be paying a ton on homeowners insurance. So you can get these new builds. The only thing, the downside is not really a downside. You're in these up and coming neighborhoods. So you might have that double wide trailer that's next to you. You may have some construction going on, but these neighborhoods are all getting better. And I wouldn't say they're rough. Some people just don't have as much money. And so it just shows you to be grateful for what you have. I don't think these neighborhoods are rougher. There'd be plenty of reasons for people to go in and be like, I'm not going to buy this house. Look at that neighbor. Same thing with Lundy. There was one of the neighbors, and not the most kept yard. So you could go in and you can nitpick and be like, I'm not going to buy it for this, this, and this. But if you look at the good reasons, near the golf cart, cash flow, things are going to get better. There's a lot of good reasons. So I don't even think I've spent more on the new builds. I've been able to find them in these areas that are up and coming, and that's where I take the hit. It's not an HOA neighborhood, thank God, because you probably couldn't do a short-term rental. It's not every house is nice there, but that means that the appreciation is yet to come. So I think these are cash flowing great, and appreciation can be a dangerous game to gamble on, but for me, that's just the icing on the cake. I'm doing everything by the deal. I'm making sure I'm getting a good price. I can cash flow, and I feel I'm at the bottom of the market. Like these houses, if there's a housing bubble or whatnot, I'm not an economist. I don't play that game, but I feel like these houses are never going to get below this level. It costs $50,000 for the land. It probably costs another $25,000 for permitting and utilities and all the construction. And this is a nice 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, and leather couches, huge TV. When there's sometimes in between renters and I'm looking at this stuff, like I'll sit down there and watch a TV show without the wife and kids. Yeah. It's a very nice place.
She probably won't listen to this show, right?
I don't think she's.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way. And some of mine, I'll visit sometimes. I'm like, man, this is actually really nice. Like I forgot how nice this is.
No clutter. Yeah, it's not like your house has things. Like there's no clutter. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, those are all great points. There was something you just brought up that I was going to touch on there about the location, that you could get nitpicky, but really, what I found works best with these types of properties is to pick properties in the path of progress. So, if you can see things are developing and going in the right direction, don't pick the area that's already pristine and as the highest price point, because you're going to be capped on appreciation. Pick the area that's just getting better and better, and you'll see appreciation really like exponentially increase. So I think that's really smart. And I was curious what your cash flow is on these two properties, because I mean that is an amazing price point to get brand new properties.
So Collie's it's been up and running. That's the one we bought in September. So we've been running that one, and it's just been pretty much booked solid. So we've top line anywhere from 4,500 to 5,500, which was our best month. Like spring break just flew off the handles. So, and we're doing, I think in those months, if you take in the extra supplies, we might have 2,500, maybe a little bit more in expenses. So if we do a 5,500 month, we could take home 3. But it's a pretty consistent, solid 2,000 cash flow for sure. And then a couple months it gets high. And the nights of light, like November and December, were very busy. That continued through January. February was a surprise. It was busy. March was crazy. So I'd say we've had a little bit of a lull in April, but it's still like the weekends are always booked out a few months in advance, and we fill in. It's just how quick we fill in the weekdays. March I got to, and like there was no vacancy by the time March 1st happened, and I like that. April had to fill in some weekdays, but they just seem to do really well. And I kind of monitor their pricing. So if the weekdays aren't going, I'll adjust. I try to fill. I don't like to waste a commodity. I have a floor, but I always try to see. And my goal is to get to that 85% occupancy, which is a very full calendar when you're looking at it. That's only a few speckled days.
Yeah. I mean, 85, that's amazing. And there is so much strategy around pricing. I see all the time. We go through deals on our weekly calls, and you look at comps and people just set their price at 150 for the whole year, or 200 for the year. And I'm like, man, you are leaving tens of thousands of dollars on the table, because we have properties that rent for 11 times as much in July than they do in January for a night. It's crazy. So I think that's super smart. In Florida, I mean, the only slow time period really is kind of like late spring and early fall, after before kids are out of school, after they go back to school, and then the rest of the time you got snowbirds and families traveling. And
there's just so much good times. I think April I said a little bit, but it's still kind of picked up too. And June and July has been booking crazy. So I'm thinking maybe August, September, I'll see another slowdown, but I've already experienced what I say is enough of a high season that it's no matter what happens in the last couple of months, it shouldn't matter. But there's just always people coming here for different reasons. And the northeast corner of Florida is interesting. And these houses, like downtown St. Augustine is great. I love it there. But if you cross the bridge where I'm at, maybe a mile down the road, my same house would be going for $800,000. And in a hurricane zone, in a flood zone, you'd be paying so much more just for the value and so much more for the flood insurance. They would make you get flood insurance if you had a loan on that. And so I'm kind of right. And as soon as you're out of that expense zone, you're also out of the flood zone. And we found a great company, maybe like the plug, Kin Insurance. We're doing $900 a year for a short-term rental insurance, and they don't care if it's a long-term or short-term, if it's not vacant, and that's what they're insuring these for, because they know it's just very little risk. And I think there's more companies coming to Florida that see opportunity in people who are non-flood zones, who have wind mitigation, who have these little homes that it's at such a low price point. If there's some damage to it, like I can't imagine even making a claim, to tell you the truth. But if I did, can't imagine it costing too much to fix either.
Yeah. I remember you mentioning that company. So it's KIN, right?
KIN.
Yep. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, $900, like everyone's freaking out over insurance in Florida to have a new build that you're insuring for $900. And talk about path of progress, just outside of where that same house would be 800,000. With so many people flooding into Florida, it's only going to expand. The high end area is just going to get bigger and bigger. So just makes so much sense to buy it for a fourth or a third of the cost, and just cash flow in the meantime, sit on it and wait for it to appreciate. So just doing some rough math here. So if each of those properties is $2,500 in net cash flow, and the other one in Palatka is $1,000, you're at about $6,000 of net cash flow just from the three of them, not counting any your Alaska property or your other long-term rental. And it's in St. Augustine, right?
It is. Yep.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
The Alaska one's bringing upwards of maybe 1,000, 1,100, which I'm kind of at the point ready to sell that. I'd love to take that and put it into a short-term rental here as I'm building. Like, I just love St. Augustine. I want to bring stuff closer, because that's not always a good strategy, but closer to an area that I think is really good for short-term rentals. And just Alaska's getting far away, but that cash flow is nice. And then the other one too, I'm looking to it does maybe 100 or 200. It's just because of it's in an HOA. It's got a lot of other expenses. It's appreciated very nicely though. So I'd love to take that appreciation. Once the long-term tenants tell me they're ready to go, I will sell it. But I don't like to, I normally first a right refusal to the to who's ever in there. So once they tell me they're ready to pack up, I'll probably try to bring that into downtown St. Augustine, because I'm done kind of with HOA fees. I think they're not a waste, but they can get out of hand. And I've looked at probably every community in St. John's, especially before I started to live here, and then as I've been investing. And it's really hard to manage an HOA well. And everything looks good and pretty for the first 5 years. But if you really dig into the numbers and the deferred maintenance and the reserves, or the lack of reserves, they're kind of a financial nightmare waiting to happen. And I've seen a lot of condos and townhomes and HOAs hit that 15-year mark and have a lawsuit and have no plan for repairing the roofs and get hit with the insurance. So if you think your insurance is bad, just imagine for a townhome community. And that's just too much for me to watch. I watch it in my own neighborhood, and there's a lot to watch. And I haven't found anyone who's did as good a job as me keeping an eye on the finances. So I just find them to be a very big risk, unfortunately, for investors. And you're not going to be as involved in it. And your neighbors kind of hate you a little bit for renting it out. Unfortunately, there's this big stigma against long-term rentals. There's a huger one against short-term rentals. I don't know what it is, because I found there to be people who are bad owners and people who are bad renters. It has nothing to do with whether you rent or own. It's just the type of person you are. Mm-hmm. But there is this stigma, and I'm not sure why. So I think moving out of those HOAs where you can really have as much flexibility on your property. And St. Augustine has a historic district. They've already ruled what can happen in there. They've ruled what can happen on the outside. So there's enough legislation around it. And I don't think they're going to impose any restrictions where I'm at, because they've kind of already decided. And so that's a really good thing as well. So I feel safe and comfortable in that area.
Yeah. A couple great points there. Yeah, I'm with you on HOAs, because I had one in Chicago right out of the Army. Right after I got out of the Army, I bought a condo downtown Chicago, right on Lake Michigan, $1,100 HOA fee, which is insane. They had a gym and a doorman and all the ridiculousness. So I rented that out for a while, and then one day we got a letter from a developer saying, I want to buy your building and turn it into an apartment. And so we're going to pay you. Basically, it was double what each unit was worth. They're going to pay every owner off double what it's worth. So we had a HOA meeting, and I'm like, man, everyone's going to be on board with this. This is going to be great. And everyone is standing up screaming, they're trying to steal my condo. And I'm like, wait, take the double and go next door and buy a new condo. But homeowners, who've been in there for the last 40 years are a little bit different than investors in terms of mindset. So you're always going to be the minority when it comes to the HOA. So, learned a lot about HOAs very similarly when I went through that. And then, I think that's that. What was the other point? I was going to, you brought up something about,
maybe the laws.
Yeah. The laws. Yeah, exactly. So it was already, the law was already established in St. Augustine. And that's what I recommend to people too. When you're looking for a short-term rental, don't buy where it's unknown, buy where they've already established a law. They typically don't jump around a lot. Obviously it can be modified over time, but you're in a much safer position there. So that's smart.
I feel good with Florida, because you need to have a business license to do it. So you file with the state, and then you pay the state sales tax, like you would for anything. So sales tax is pretty common. And then St. Johns County, if you rent anything less than 6 months, there's a tourism tax, which is now up to 5%, which not a big fan of taxes, but I feel like it's a very good revenue generator from them. So I don't see them. Do I see them raising it to 6%? Sure. Do I see them being like, you know what, we're going to forego all that tax money? No. So whenever something's taxed, as much as it kind of stinks to give up that tax, it's also pretty safe that the government doesn't ever want to lose that extra money. So having Florida that is kind of pro rental, I think for the most part, they don't want the local jurisdictions to roll too much on it. I know there's been some talk about that recently, but for the most part, I still find them to be pro rental. And then the local jurisdictions making money off of it. Once the government makes money off of it, I feel that's a pretty safe bet.
Yeah, absolutely. So for you personally, then, you've got these 3 short-term rentals. You still have a couple of long-term rentals that you're thinking about cashing in on the equity and turning those into short-term rentals. You have another short-term rental under contract. How many more properties do you think you would need to feel comfortable being able to step away from your job if you wanted to. Not that you're in a rush for the exit, but just to have the option.
Sure. Yeah, I guess the one I have under contract is actually a IRA LLC, so it's for a retirement account. So I'd love to get that going and in there, but that's definitely can't touch any of that money, so it doesn't count towards the cash flow. But I think it's a really good retirement tool, and I like real estate, and I know it, and I don't know the stock market too much, so I think that's good. But I definitely want to keep the Lundy. I've got these two going strong. I would really like to get the two more. I want to move the Alaska house here, and I want to move that other St. Augustine house there. And then if I get those up and running and the loans and all those expenses, I feel that I'd feel pretty comfortable. And with the income, I've been able to pad those accounts. Each one has its own account. I've been able to build up the amount of money, buy some extra stuff for it, fix it up, and have a really good cushion in there. Because with real estate, you always want to have, you don't want to be operating at like a net zero cash. You want to have some cushion in there. Things happen. There's seasonality. Luckily, Florida, it's not too much, but in other places, that can be a very huge thing. So I think being able to have cash flow you can be not profitable for a business for a while. You can't be in an unfavorable cash position. So I think having two more and being able to close out, this year, that'd be my dream. If I could get the two more, get them all set up, close out the year, see how taxes go, and then look at how they perform for a whole year. I think if I'm not ready to move away, I'm at least very, very comfortable. And if not, by definitely the end of 2025 would be, I've shooting before I turned 40. So I think that's the end of 2026. But if I would love to have them up and running and look at one full year profit and loss for sure.
Sure. But yeah. That's awesome. And I talk about this a lot, like how I don't want to say easy, because I know it hasn't been easy, but how simple it can be. Yeah, exactly. With just a handful of properties to get to a place where you can actually make leaving your full-time job a reality. That's what we did too. And I waited too long. I waited till we got 8. You're talking about 5, not including the one in your IRA that's not going to, that you're not going to be able to touch that cash flow, but it's still a big wealth builder. So you need 2 more properties. So you just started at the beginning of 2023. We're now, a few months into 2024, 1 quarter in. You get 2 more this year, and basically in 2 years, you've freed yourself from, or having the option, I guess, not that you're planning to leave, but to have the option to leave, which is a totally different animal when you walk into work and that whatever happens today, I could walk out the door and I'm fine, as opposed to I have to be here today just to pay my bills. You carry yourself very, very different. You make very different decisions. So I love that. That's congratulations on all the success so far.
It's been definitely great. And I think just taking the steps, because Lundy, some might have seen it as like a misstep, but I think it was a good deal. So it's just do that and buy it now. And I think real estate, there's transactional fees. I mean, I'm not saying it's cheap, but the money doesn't really it doesn't disappear. If you're buying on sound principles and you don't like something, you can always pull out of it. But I haven't had to do that for anything. Like, I've been able to transform and do it. So I think it gives you more options. The more properties, the more options, the more equity, the more people willing to lend to you. So as long as you're looking at the numbers ahead of time for cash flow, I think it just it works. And you have to just do the work. And it's not easy. There's some stuff I said, like I was the day after Christmas, I was digging up a septic tank because somebody threw a bunch of baby wipes down it. So I mean, there's some not glamorous stuff that goes on. And there's something. I mean, the day after Christmas, the plumber, he came out luckily, and he looked at me. He's like, it goes quicker with 2 people. So he was like, it's the day after Christmas. He's like, you're helping me unscrew this lid. Yeah. So and you just have to kind of make it happen. And I get calls in the middle of the night and I get some ridiculous stuff. But I'm systematizing things, I get less and less. I set it up pretty well. And for those considering like long-term to short-term, I was anti-short-term. I just thought it was going to be too much work. But it's actually a lot less. You can get into the house every few days. You can look at stuff. You can fix things. You can schedule things. You don't have to worry about my rent's a little bit late, or I need the backsplash here, or I don't know how to work the circuit breaker, like little stuff that you just deal with the long-term tenants. I found the short terms, they normally don't contact you. And if they do, it's an easy fix. And if they're a pain, they're gone in like a week. And it's just nice. And 90% of them are great. I mean, I've had nothing but good experiences. The other 10% rough around the edges, but I've never really had anything majorly go wrong.
Yeah, yeah. Knock on wood. That's right. No, that's been our experience too. And that most people I talk to, it's like that, you know. And it's even the 10%. It's not like they are rock star in the place like you read about in the mainstream news
I
about.
haven't
It
had
seems
that.
like every
Yeah.
Airbnb is destroyed. But yeah, and you're a responsible owner. I'm curious, like what systems you've put in place, like or what changes, or maybe a lesson learned that you had that maybe changed the way you did things.
Yeah. Like Airbnb, I just use Airbnb right now. I haven't had the need to
Okay.
go to other platforms. So I think just learning that, I have it on my phone, which helps. And then I have a lock. It's called DD Lock. And I think Airbnb has its own integration now, but I found a lock that has an app that I can connect to wirelessly, and just having that all in there. And normally whenever, I wake up, I just go on my phone, I look at the rentals, and I make sure that everyone has their welcome message and the keys. It's just very easy to go on Airbnb and on my phone, and I could just do it from anywhere. And I normally always just do everything at like 7 o'clock in the morning. It's not too early, not too late. Before I get any questions, I normally beat 99% of guests to the questions. And then having the exact same lock, the exact same Wi-Fi. I have the exact same Wi-Fi network and password to all of them, so I never have to think about it when I'm hooking up the rings. And I use Ring for everything, because I know the licensing for the county. So I use it for smoke, CO2. I can give guest codes to the door too. So a few people like to set the alarm, so they have that. I get the smoke detectors. I had one weekend where all three of them, like somebody burned something in the kitchen, and it was fine. But it's just nice to know that as an owner, that like people don't feel like they're being watched, but I have a little bit of security on that, and they can set the alarm. I can set it when it's vacant. I like to have I get the Ring alarm right away with the internet, because when I put all this furniture in, sometimes in these neighborhoods that maybe developing, I don't want to sit it empty there. So I don't want people, just to attract people like that.
Sure.
So that's helped a lot. Getting a cleaner who can link up with my Airbnb calendar, that has been huge. And then anything that gives you a problem, just fixing it and not being cheap on anything. I had this one door lock that I think was the people. People would just enter the code too quick. They try to jump in too quick. And I could tell how they were going to be based on how impatient they were with opening the door. I find if you're patient, you're a neater guest. It's just a psychological thing, but it was a pain. And I had all this, my welcome message got longer and longer and longer about like what to do and like, wait for it. Don't. And then eventually just like, I just took out the lock and I got another one, and it just, all these messages went away. And I was like, what was I thought it was their fault, and maybe it was or it wasn't, but if there's anything that's just taking time, just eliminate it. And so that's helped a lot.
Nice. It's like that book, The One Thing. What's the one thing I can do that will save, I forget how it's phrased, but it's like the one thing you can do that saves you time many times over in the future. And just changing that lock was one.
Or canned Airbnb messages. So I have a booking message, you're on your way here, and a checkout message, and I set those up, and they're pretty straightforward. And the only thing, I just changed the lock code in it to them. So whenever I found myself doing the same thing over and over again, I'm like, okay, what can I do to not have to do this?
Yeah.
And it's been pretty good. And Airbnb is a great platform, because I use the RV ones, and they're just, so seeing somebody who's up and coming versus like the people who are there, like the software is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, they've basically stolen all the third-party software that all these other apps keep creating, like automated messaging and pricing and all the cleaner integration, stuff like that, that they just integrate into their app then, and it just becomes better and better. So that's great. The last thing I was kind of curious about was how you're finding these deals. I think that's probably a question a lot of people have, is like, you found quite a few in a pretty short time span. What's your main strategy for looking for deals?
Yeah, I'd love to say something inventive, and I think I pay $100 to like Pin or some other type of fancy property search software, and I think it charges my credit card and doesn't do much for me. So I use Zillow and the MLS, and I have like you draw the circle, and I kind of know what I'm looking for, and just based on a couple of the pictures and like the bed, bath, and the price point, I can normally tell if it's something I'm interested in. And I just kind of look at it every day. And then, when you start doing searches on Zillow and you save it to your phone, it pings you all the time. So in the morning, I will look through my phone and do all these different searches and see these different houses. So it's just consistently. And when I see one that I like, I call the realtor and I say, I don't have a buyer's agent. Can I see the house? So I think just acting quick. That's been the biggest thing, because some of these I've been on for like a day, and I knew they were, the one on Herbert like was right off of the main street. You can walk to downtown, and it was going for 325. And I was like, this house is going to sell immediately. It had 9-foot ceilings. Like nobody does that in the downtown. It's just a beautiful house. It's the nicest one I have. And it was only like a 25 grand premium on everything else, and a fenced in yard. It's flat. It's got a deck and a screen room. Like it's super nice. And I called her and I'm like, listen, I can meet you right now. And I'm like, I really like the house. And I'm like, I don't like to like BS. I'm like, it's a good, I don't like to haggle with prices too. I'm not a negotiator. I just, as someone who sells things more than buys things, I like to say what the price is. I don't like when people try to tell me something different. So I'm like, I like this price. I just want to make an offer for it. And I put the normal contingencies for inspection. And so, I just want to make sure the investment's right. I want 10 days to take it over. Maybe sometimes I'll say it can be 40 days for closing. So it's just a little less pressure. And then like, can you, since I'm not bringing a realtor, can you contribute 5,000 towards closing costs? And normally that's kind of sells it. And if I'm on that, I need 5 or 10 grand off the price to make the deal, it's probably not a good deal. And I'd rather have that relationship, because the realtors have recommended cleaners to me. They've recommended next houses, next builders. Whereas if you tried to get in and like fight them, and maybe you get, even if you get 10 grand off the price, which I don't think you would, like, I don't know, for a few $1,000s, you're probably burning or not fostering a relationship. So, but yeah, all Zillow, acting quickly, and then just making it known that you're no nonsense, willing to give earnest money right away, willing to get an inspector right away. And then I know moving that quickly, if there's a red flag or I see something else, I check the flood maps, I check with the home inspector, or I check up the builder, or I see a problem. 10 days, when you're working with a builder and a title company, you can withdraw. They cannot keep your earnest money. There's nothing they can do. They might get upset with you. And normally that's not the case. So.
Yeah. Such great advice. And that's exactly what I recommend too. Everyone thinks that you've got to have like this fancy off-market strategy where you're paying tons of money for lists and stuff like that. But just set up a search for the type of property that you're looking for. And when they pop up, take action right away. Call the listing agent, work directly with them. Like you said, it makes a huge difference. That's how we bought the last probably 10 properties that we've purchased as well. And it works. It works. You're going to find those diamonds in the rough here and there. So fantastic. Well, I appreciate all of this advice. This has been super insightful. If people want to check out your properties, do you have a website, or do you have a link they can go to, or what's the
actually, I just have an Airbnb now, but you're right, I am working on, I'm going to get the RV and all the short terms on a website. So that is my next step, but so I'll be sure to send that out to you when I do it. But yeah, that's on my to-do list, and now you've made me hurry it up.
Yeah, well, it's not the first priority. I don't recommend, in the beginning, but as you accumulate more, it's nice to have that direct booking site. But you can go to Airbnb and search Paul's name and find his properties under his host profile too. So it's Paul. Well, you can see the spelling in the show notes there, but it's Paul, Proios, right?
That's it. If you spell it right, you almost always get me.
Awesome. Yeah. So you can check them out on Airbnb. And I forgot to mention too, we're doing this interview live. And so we had, I should have mentioned at the beginning so others could comment as well. But William Tingle said at the beginning, action takers are money makers, which I love because we were talking about you taking action. So I appreciate that comment, William. And Paul, really appreciate you taking the time to share all your wisdom with this audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Kirby. It's been a great experience on your program, and I appreciate all that you do, and you're always there to answer questions. So it's been super helpful to have someone to just talk all this stuff through. So that's you're doing a great service. So I recommend anyone to you, because it's been, I think, life-changing so far, and I think it's only going to get better.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, thanks. Have a good one. Bye.